What's up, Dialysis disciples? So, as you know, we're going to be talking about shame tonight. Now, shame is a brutal, brutal weapon of the enemy, right? So, but I have a question for you. How many of you ever felt, you ever sat in that chair and you're like, man, I don't even feel like me. I don't even recognize me no more. Like, this can't be life, right? If that's you, tonight's training is going to bring you something you may not have had in a while. Hope. Real hope. Because when we finish, you're going to walk away knowing how to step back into this season in your life, into this dialysis season and the treatments without the heavy weight of shame on your chest, right? And we're going to define shame a little later, but shame is just self-blame, like blaming, like erroneously blaming yourself for situations in your life. Now, even if these are situations that were caused by, you know, unwise decisions, we're going to learn tonight that it's still not your fault, right? I'm reminded of that movie Good Will Hunting, and he was trying to. Robin Williams was trying to get through to Matt Damon for the whole movie. Then he just finally looked at him in his eyes and said, "It's not your fault," right? And you know why that was so impactful for him? Because he was, his I forgot his character's name, but he was feeling such a deep, deep, deep emotion of shame, right? So by the end of this live, you'll know like why shame hits dialysis warriors so hard, like how to recognize it for what it really is. It's not a weakness. It's a spiritual attack on your whole identity and your whole worth, right? You're gonna know what to do the next time it shows up, right? And if it's something that's pervasive in your life and something that doesn't show up, it's something you live with, right? You're gonna learn how to not let it steal your peace or affect your identity anymore, right? So a lot of dialysis patients believe a lot of lies that the enemy tells. The enemy is a master deceiver. One of my good buddies, he's a member of this group. He calls him slick, right? I like that. So we're gonna talk about the lies that slick tells you, right? And he may say something to you to say, man, you weak. You should be stronger than you are, all right? Or he might say, whisper to you, you're a burden to your family. It just deepens the shame, right? You're less of a man, or you're less of a woman right now because you're on this machine. You need this machine to keep you alive, right? He might say God's punishing you because you're a piece of crap, right? And some of us hear that and we're like, man, ooh, and it feels yucky. But believe it or not, there are people who are really talking to themselves that way, right? Now, those are false beliefs that the enemy uses to convince you that sorry, I'm getting a little fired up already, that the enemy uses to convince you that you're disqualified, right? But God says just the opposite, right? You're still chosen, you're still valuable, and you're still part of his plan. That's the most important part to know, right? So tonight, we're going to shatter all those lies, kick slick right in the teeth, right? And replace them with truth from the word of God, right? And when we're done, you'll know exactly what to do when that moment hits, right? And when you sit down at the machine and I can't believe I did this to myself, right? And you start telling yourself, I can't do this no more, because that's where your mindset is, right? So that was the intro. I'm Troy Sneed. I'm a 25-year plus kidney warrior. I'm a 3-time cancer survivor. And tonight we're going to talk about this one thing, the shame, right? So if you're here live, let me get hashtag team live. And if you're watching replay, let me get a hashtag team replay. And if you're watching on YouTube, let me get like, subscribe, comment, all that good YouTubey stuff, right? We post these videos on YouTube because Facebook takes them off for 30 days, after 30 days, right? So the shame is something that attacks your identity, right? And it hits your identity harder than it actually hits your physical body, right? It hits who you believe you actually are, right? We're breaking that, right? We're going to make you understand who you are because of whose you are, right? So let's talk about what shame actually is. So you can't change something or break something down if you don't know what it is, right? So before we get into it, let's talk about what that is. So shame is just self-blame mostly. And a lot of times we make choices that make us think that we are to blame, right? And I don't want to go down a huge rabbit hole, but we know that all things work to the good, right? Um, and that's a pretty high level mindset shift for some of us, right? But my aim is to get you there. So in Genesis, Adam and Eve, they sinned. They partook of the tree that they weren't supposed to partake of, right? And think about it. That's the first emotional reaction that's recorded in Scripture. It wasn't anger, it wasn't fear, it was shame. Think about that, right? So shame is pretty much it's prompted by the enemy. We talked about that and the self blame, right? So like they Adam and Eve, they suddenly became aware of themselves because sin infected them, right? Whole nother talk. They felt exposed. All of a sudden, they start seeing themselves and they're blaming themselves and they're feeling this immense guilt and shame about their actions, right? It made them feel less than, right? And what was the first thing they did? They covered themselves and they hid. Ooh, let that connect. Let that connect with some of you on the line here. And you know what? I pray that I don't care if it's just one person watching. And I just pray that this video gets to someone who needs to hear it someday, right? Might be 50 of y'all on this live, might be none, right? But I trust that God's going to put this in front of someone who needs to hear it, right? But if you're listening to this and you understand and you look at your life and you're covering yourselves and shaming yourselves, not putting yourselves out there, not making content and communicating with people and adding value to others, right? That's hiding. And that's coming from a sense of shame. And the thing about shame, a lot of us don't even know that we're in that. A lot of us don't even know how to articulate that emotion. So pay attention tonight, guys. And if anything resonates with you, and if you feel yourselves maybe feel the ways and understand what some of the things that I'm describing, listen to the end because that's we're going to give you some actions to take, right? See, shame makes you hide. Shame makes you draw back. Shame makes you feel like you need to cover who you are. It destroys your whole self-image, right? Self-image. We are made in His image. So our image should be of Him. Come on, guys, right? But here's the part you dialysis warriors need to hear, right? When that happened, God came looking for him. Come on now. I know some of y'all connecting the dots and you see where I'm going, right? He didn't wait until they fixed themselves, right? He didn't wait until they were strong again. He didn't wait until they themselves felt worthy again, right? He came right in the middle of their shame, right? I'm not going to do a whole Bible study, but he said, Adam, where are you, right? Who told you you were naked? Come on, read it. Read it for yourself. Genesis 2, I believe, right? So, shame it suffocates your true identity, right? If shame has made you want to isolate, right? If shame has convinced you you're not enough anymore, right? God will come into those places, right? He doesn't avoid shame, He invades it, right? Dialysis doesn't disqualify you, right? Dialysis doesn't disqualify God from covering you, right? He covers you. You don't cover yourself, right? God will cover you in the shame. He'll pull you out of the shame, and then He'll restore your identity. You just have to trust in Him. And at the end of this live, I'm going to give you a biblical example, right? You can always find biblical examples in the Bible, right? So who's the real enemy here, right? Or I should say, where's the real fight? You know who the enemy is, aka Slick, right? But like, where's the real fight, right? Like, how many of you ever felt invisible in your own life, like ever since dialysis started, right? Like when dialysis enters your life, like you're forced into a world that constantly reminds you of all the stuff you can't do. Like the shame might whisper to you like you're weaker now, or you're fragile now, right? And you can't do the things you used to do, right? So I don't know. My wife, I think she's napping. I don't know if she's watching, but I didn't even talk to her about this. So she's probably gonna be like, "What?" After this, she's gonna talk to me. But we had a pastor appreciation day at our for our church, and we were bringing a lot of stuff, and we had a lot of stuff in the car. And to her credit, my wife put the stuff in the car. And when we were driving there, she's like, "I hope it's some men here to help me carry this in here." I'm like, "Oh my goodness!" Right? That hit me right smack dead in what used to be shame for me. Right? If I was still living in that place, that would have hit me right dead smack in the kisser. Right? But what I realized and what I've learned over the years and over being reconnected with the Father, right, is that comes from ego and self assuredness, right? But when you're humble and you know your identity and you know your strength is in the Father and your hope and joy and your power is in the Father, it doesn't affect me, or it won't affect you like that anymore, right? Who's with me? Give me some waves in the chat, fellas, right? If your loved one or the woman in your life sees you as someone who can't do what you used to do, right? But I'm here to tell you that, you know, your identity, and when it's connected to the Father, right? And the word says don't take offense, and your hope and your joy is in the Lord. It's not going to take you down that spiraling path, right? And later on in the live, we're going to talk about the consequences of unchecked shame, right? So that's a personal lesson for you. I'm on here being transparent for you guys because, I believe that that's the only way to help you, right? And the word says we overcome by the power of our testimony, right? So if you're on here a number of times and you're a constant follower and watcher of these lives, first I want to thank you. But we always talk about reframing and shifting our minds, shifting our thoughts to more thoughts that serve us, right? Not thoughts that feed shame and bring us down, right? So, excuse me. So let me ask you another question. How many ever notice when your identity gets attacked, everything else dims, right? You go into yourself, right? And then that shame leads to withdrawal. And then that withdrawal leads to isolation, right? And then that isolation leads to depression. That's all a trick and plan and scheme of the enemy. When you hear me pray or you hear others pray, I dismantle every trick and scheme of the enemy. That's a scheme of the enemy. He gets you to be in shame, which will get you to withdraw, and isolate, which will lead you to depression. And we all know what depression does, right? And basically what that is, that's the essence of the dialysis drift. If you're on these lives, you hear me talk about the dialysis drift. And that dialysis drift is just doing the same thing over and over and over again. Going to dialysis, going to sleep, coming home, going to dialysis, eating, going to sleep, waking up, going to dialysis. That's an insidious plan, and that's how he draws you away. And that's what dialysis drift is. And you know how you get out of that? I'm going to tell you a little later. But here's the hint. You have to have a reason for being. You have to know the purpose why you're here on this earth, right? And we're going to get into that a little later as well, right? But something to think about. Here's something I want you to think about. Dialysis doesn't destroy you through the toxin. Like the actual treatment of dialysis isn't the thing that destroys you. It's the hope you lose when you go into dialysis drift, when you let the shame take over. Okay, so let's talk about the consequences of unchecked shame, right? Who's with me? Get some fires in the chat. Y'all quiet. We all that. All right. let's get some fires in the chat so I can know y'all here, right? So we're gonna talk about the consequences of unchecked shame. So when your shame isn't confronted, it doesn't stay just an emotional thing. It becomes a outward behavioral thing, right? Your inward conversation to yourself starts to be negative. You start believing you're unworthy of good care, right? You start eating like crap. You start missing treatments and stuff. Come on, who's with me, right? And you stop fighting to take care of your body. And it might not be something that you're doing consciously. It's doing something that's unconscious because that's how shame and the enemy works, insidious, right? So how many of you ever skipped a treatment because you were tired and maybe you felt like a burden, right? These are all negative emotions coming from slick, not from the Father, right? This is how shame becomes destruction. Like you miss treatments, you stop eating right, you stop caring, you shut down. And I know there's a lot of people in the group, Dialysis Disciples group, who feel that way because they've told me. Whether or not you're watching this live tonight, I pray that the Father reveals it to you, maybe on replay or whatever. But I know there's people who feel that way. I'm in a lot of dialysis groups, and people post stuff like, I can't do this no more. Like, I don't care no more. You know, that's the enemy, right? That's not the Father giving you those thoughts, right? Some dialysis patients turn to drugs and alcohol and, sexual sin, promiscuity, as ways to numb that that feeling of shame that they may not even be able to put their finger on of why or what it is they're feeling, right? They just know that they don't want to feel like that. So I'm gonna roll up, I'm gonna sip, I'm gonna text shorty. You know what I mean? All of those things are ways of numbing the pain of the shame, right? Right. Shame makes you want relief instead of results, right? So, in my book, the 40-day, a gifted tome, the 40-day spiritual fast for dialysis patients, day 30 of the 40-day spiritual fast, I tell the story of my dark turn after I lost my kidney after my first kidney transplant. Right, I took a dark turn, and I was overwhelmed with shame. Now, here's the thing about it. At the time, I wasn't like, I'm walking around like, oh, I'm shameful. Oh, shame, shame, shame. No, you don't even, when you're in it, you don't know how to define it. You just know you feel like crap. You hate yourself, right? And you do things that don't help yourself, right? And that's how it gets you, right? But what I learned from that situation, and it took me a long while to learn it after I got out of it, after I started walking the path that the Father ordained for me, then I was able to look back and see, okay, during that time, I had a lot of shame, right? But that's why He called me to do these lives to help you. So you don't have to go through the same thing I went through. You can come on here, you can get these definitions, you can recognize the shame and don't have to wait 30 years for it to be defined for you because of negative consequences that happen to you, right? So shame unchecked, it becomes a slow spiritual death, a spiritual slow death, I should say. And that's why being on here tonight matters, right? So, but now that you learn all this, you can't ignore it anymore. You can't live in the dialysis drift anymore. Like, you have to act, right? If everything I've said resonated with you and it hit you and this, you like, yeah, that's me, right? Give me some waves in the chat if you don't care what people think, right? You can't stay in it anymore. Now that you know what it is, now that you've defined it, right? So, but here's the good news. The shame can be reset, right? And that's what I'm going to talk to you about for the remainder of this live, right? I'm going to give you three new ways of thinking, right? And as you know, what we do on this channel is we shift the mind. We shift the perspective. We turn negative thoughts into thoughts that serve us, right? And that's what we're going to do tonight, right? So most dialysis warriors, you might wait for shame to pass because you don't even know that's what you're going through. But shame doesn't pass. It doesn't just go away, right? Unchecked, it'll grow. It'll attach. It attaches and it becomes your identity, right? Identity of shame is very destructive, right? So this is the part where we stop letting shame decide the story. This is the part where you take authority back because you have authority in Christ Jesus. Anybody on this live, watching this live, and in this group has some connection to the Father and has some belief that Jesus Christ is Lord, right? And because we are made in his image, because we have a spiritual authority because of Christ Jesus, we have the authority to eliminate Slick from our lives, dismantle his plans, and take our identity back, right? And that's what I'm going to teach you to do here the rest of the night. So, how many, give me some waves in the chat. How many want to know exactly what to do when this shame identity tries to sabotage your, when it sabotages your identity, right? Or maybe you're sitting in the chair and it attacks you, right? Your thoughts just go crazy on you and you get to the point where you start feeling shameful. Some of us live in it. Some of us just live in it, right? How many of you want to learn how to get out of that, right? I'm going to give you three. And it's all a battle of the mind. It's all a battle of the mind. Some of the lives, we talk about physical ways to bring back energy and what to eat and things of that nature. But anything we talk about today is going to be a battle of the mind, right? We do not war with flesh and blood, right? And the mind, right? The mind is just your brain and your heart connected, right? And your soul, right? Your inner being. That's your mind. That's what the Bible refers to, your heart and your mind, right? So 3 ways of thinking to reset your identity, guys. This is why you're here tonight. If you're suffering from shame and you're watching this live and you realize, wait, he's talking about me. I didn't even know he's talking about me. Get your notepad. I'm gonna give you just 3 little quick mind shifts, right? So what we're gonna talk about first is we're gonna go from identity loss to identity training. What's that? Right? Okay. So dialysis, being on dialysis, isn't the thief of your identity, right? Shame is, right? And we know that's a weapon of the enemy. The Bible says that he comes to kill, steal, and destroy. A thief. That's what thieves do, right? And his weapon of thievery is shame, right? So when you experience shame, your brain interprets dialysis as that thing that took your strength and your future and your freedom. But the real thief was the belief system, right? The belief that's what happened to your body is equal to who you are, right? Your identity, who you are, right, is I'm a blank, right? Whether you say the words or not, I'm a struggling dialysis patient. I'm a shameful dialysis patient, right? Whether you use the words or not, that's what you're telling yourself your identity, what your identity is, right? But so this season is not actually the removal of your identity, it's the refining of it, right? So this is the time when God trains identity through resistance, right? He develops endurance. He develops a spiritual muscle, right? Dialysis didn't steal who you are. It's revealing the warrior that God placed in you, right? This is where this is not, the dialysis machine and this season of your life is not where your identity was meant to die, right? This is where it was meant to be formed, right? And everything we do in this channel, right, is based on hearing from the Father and hearing what he called you to do, right? And before you can even ever attempt to obey the Father's will and do what he called you to do on this planet, you got to know who you are based on who he is, right? So the reframe is dialysis isn't the enemy. Slick is the enemy. Dialysis is where God is using me to train to defeat him. Who's tracking, right? Another mind shift I want you to make, right, is I want you to go from proving your strength, right, to choosing strength, right? So what do I mean by that? So your strength how can I explain it? Your strength is now your endurance and your consistency and your faith, right? Before you were diagnosed, your strength was measured by what you could accomplish physically. Like, if your wife says grab these boxes, right? But now your strength is in your identity and you're choosing to keep going. That's how you prove your strength, right? It's having faith that the Father's going to take care of you, right? And it's being consistent, going to treatment, getting better, using the treatment as your training ground, right? And if we ever work together, I'll teach you how to make that 4 hours, whether you're in the clinic or that hour and a half, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever your prescription is at home, how to make that time the time to choose endurance and consistency and faith to show strength and build yourself up in this season, right? So, you know, now that you're on dialysis, right? Like I said, your strength, the definition of your strength shifts. Like, it's showing up anyway. Refusing to quit on bad days, right? Choosing faith over fear, faith over failure, right? Slick wants you to choose a version of yourself you used to need, right? God is developing a different version of strength right now, right? You don't have to prove your strength anymore. You can just choose it. You can choose your strength by showing up, staying consistent, and following the path that God laid out for you, right? And the third mind shift I want you to make is knowing that this isn't the end. This is just the beginning. This season on dialysis is preparation. I know it might be hard to see now, right? But it's preparation. God is preparing you to do what He called you to do, right? We did a live a few months ago called the 7 Purpose Secrets or the 7 Purpose Principles. And it's basically talking about why, 7 reasons why you should know that God put you here for a reason, right? Scroll back, go to YouTube, A Gifted Tone, Dialysis Disciples YouTube, and look at the 7 Purpose Secrets to get more understanding of what we're doing here on this channel. But this season on dialysis, right, is prepping you. It's prepping you for that assignment, for that purpose that God called you for, right? Most dialysis warriors think that this season is punishment or it's a pause in your life. They think their life is on hold. That is not true. That's a lie straight from the pit of hell. Your life is not on hold, right? You're in the most important season of it, right? God never wastes a season, right? Preparation seasons feel painful because they are like they're shaping something bigger than the moment, right? This isn't the end. This is the very next chapter of your training. Come on, guys, who with me? Let me get some waves in the chat, right? This is very important for you to understand. All right, so let me give you a biblical example. This is a faith-based, biblical-based group. So let's do that. So, what was it? 1 Samuel 30. There's a story of David. We know who David is, and it's the story of David and Ziklag, right? So, just to give you some quick context. David, he's in a war. Right? He's being chased and back and forth, right? But there's a town called Ziklag, and him and his soldiers, you have to read it. They had to run out, but when they came back, all their wives and kids, loved ones were taken captive. A lot of them died, right? And David was crushed. It said all the men cried until they couldn't cry anymore, right? But David encouraged himself in the Lord. Now you might be asking, what does that got to do with shame? Well, David felt like this was all his fault. He felt an immense emotion of shame because he felt responsible for getting all his soldiers, people, kidnapped and killed, right? But here's the mind shift, right? First, you have to know that David encouraged himself in the Lord, and that's step one for anyone on here who's resonating with what I'm saying, and think that they might be suffering from shame, right? But think about it. Dialysis is your Ziklag. This is where your identity is forged. Like excuse me, y'all. Sorry about that. Hold on. So look at 1 Samuel 30. Like David and his men came back to Ziklag, like I said, and everything was gone. His families, his home, his safety, and here it comes. His identity was gone. His identity was, I'm a powerful soldier who protects my family and loved ones, and then they were gone. So his whole identity was shattered, right? And his first emotional reaction wasn't to strategize, it was collapse, right? And they all wept until they couldn't weep no more. And again, like I said, David has self-blame. Like, so shame will try to whisper things to you like, this happened because I failed. If I was stronger, this wouldn't have happened. My family is suffering because of me. These are all lies straight from the enemy. That if God ain't telling you this stuff, I should have prevented this. This is my fault. If you if you hear yourself telling yourself these things, stop it right then and there. Right? We're not speaking any negative to ourselves. Right? The question should be, what can I learn, Father? What are you teaching me from this situation? Because God never wastes pain. Right? And all those words, like I mentioned before, that's shame language, right? And the men actually put the shame on David, right? To the point they wanted to actually stone him. So imagine where he was with all that, how deep his shame was. Shame always tries to assign a scapegoat, right? Come on now. Whether it's yourself or others, shame always wants a scapegoat. That's straight out of Slick's playbook, right? But look at what David did. Come on now. He didn't sit in that shame. He didn't internalize the blame. He knew where his identity truly was. He went right there. He went right to the Father, right? And what happened? The shame shifted to his presence. And he let God define that moment, right? He didn't let failure and shame define it, right? And that's how shame is broken. By connecting with the Father, right? And that's what this book is designed to do, right? It's designed to shut everything out and go to the Father and hear his voice. Let the blood of the Lamb wash all over you. Let it break that shame identity, right? Shame is not your identity, right? And shame is not your ending, guys. It's simply the place you stand before you recover it all, right? The way out of shame is the same way David came out of it. Encourage yourself in the Lord. Inquire of God, right? Act from faith, not fear. Shame tries to lock you inside that wound. God invites you to move towards restoration. Everything's a mind shift, guys. Ziklag was that moment everything looked like it was over. Right, but God used it to set up David's greatest recovery. You want to hear it? You want to see what happened? Go read the word. Right. So this is how shame breaks, by choosing God's truth over internal accusation. That's where it comes down to, guys. And when God is first, recovery becomes inevitable. Right? We know who he is. We know what he's capable of. When you go to him, how could shame remain? How could anything other than recovery wash over you when you're sitting with him? Come on, guys. Some fires in the chat. I gave y'all some gold today. If there's anyone on here dealing with shame, I pray that this is something that'll break that. Right? So what we talk about tonight? We learned that identity hits harder. Right? Identity hits harder than the body. Right? What our identity, where we lie, what we know about our identity is more important than what we know about our bodies and what's going on with our bodies, right? Shame leads to withdrawal, which lowers your strength. But we learned that identity can be reset. And we got 3 ways, we just showed you 3 ways to do it, right? Ziklag, the story of David and Ziklag shows how God uses the lowest place to prepare for the highest calling. And I recommend you go read 1 Samuel 20, did I say? That's where the story of David and Ziklag is. All right, guys. So before we wrap, I always want to give you an opportunity to get help. Right? If you're on here tonight and these words resonated with you, and you need your Ziklag moment, and you need someone to walk you through it, that's why God called me here. Right? We'll sit down. We'll talk about what's going on with you. We'll talk about your pain points that may be causing and leading to shame, right? And we'll talk about ways to break them. We'll walk through the three ways we just talked about in more detail, right? And I can walk you through it based on my experience. Again, I've been on and off dialysis, 2 transplant, 3 cancer survivals. I know what I'm talking about, right? And I can bless you and I can help you and I can change you through the word of God, right? This book is the activation device, right? And hospinetics coaching is the framework. All of it is divinely inspired. This book, my coaching program, it all comes straight from the Father. This isn't something I made up, right? I did this fast, and then that's when He revealed all this stuff to me. Don't you want to learn what the Father's telling you? All right. Well, if that's you, put coach in the chat or DM me the word coach, right? We'll sit down, we're on a quick phone call, and we'll talk about you. We'll come up with a plan that works for you to get you out of shame, to get you working in your assignment, guys, right? DM coach or comment coach, and I'll reach out to you and we have a conversation, right? This is what I do. This is what God's called me to do, right? So I'm confident that I can help you because it's not me, it's Him through me, right? So if you got any value tonight from this live training, put value in the chat. Share it with any other dialysis warriors you know out there who may be struggling with shame or anything else. And I look forward. I look forward to talking to some of you guys, and helping you, right? Because that's what God's called me to do. So until next time, guys, um, I look forward to seeing you again. So stay strong, dialysis disciples.